Shalom. So today we're going to talk about fornication, and we're going to go deep into the history, right? So we're going to look at a few aspects. We're going to look at the ordinance of the Christian ideology contradicts original text. And I say Christian ideology because Christianity is more of an ideology, more like a belief than actually a culture. I can say other religions are actual cultures, Islam or whatever, because you have an ethnic group of people and you have their way of life. That's a culture. Christianity, the modern Western society, is based on an ideology. Everything you can think of, everything that governs this Western world comes under an ideology. It's not a religion, right? So this ideology, it contradicts the Bible, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, and this also gives way for people who believe in the Old Testament only. They think that it's actually the New Testament that contradicts the Old. No, it's the Christian culture, right? The next thing is we're going to look at the purpose of zanah and porneia. I use these two words in the two different languages because to use the word fornication and its cultural meaning or the ideological meaning, it contradicts both the Hebrew and the Greek. The Greek language does not contradict the Hebrew language. The Greek language came from the ancient Phoenician language. So the same meaning that these ancient things carry is the same meaning the Greek language carries. What corrupts everything is the Christian ideology that is imposed on whether Old or New Testament. So the next thing is, does the Greek New Testament state that sex before marriage was sinful? Again, the New Testament, did it actually say this? Is there a context that you can find where the New Testament says that sex before marriage was a sinful act? No, but you can find that in the Christian ideology. So we're going to also look into that aspect, right? Because the New Testament does not contradict the laws of old. The Christian ideology contradicts everything. Now, fornication, is there context that refers to the selling of one's soul? We're going to explore that as well. Now, going back into the ancient cultures, the sun god, the moon goddess, and the sun god rebirth. It's the same thing from ancient Mesopotamia until today. The only thing changed is the name. The rituals and the practices remain the same. They just change different names, right? So we're going to look into that, and we're going to look also into some of the sexual rites and practices and what they look like today. So let us start with the ordinance of Christian ideology contradicts original text. Usually when a New Testament believer is trying to understand the New Testament, what most people would do is try to go to the Strong's Concordance to see the Greek words to get an understanding, as opposed to go all the way back to what it actually means in the Hebrew. Now, the sex out of wedlock, which is the definition of fornication in this Christian faith, right? Now, a lot of people define fornication as sex out of wedlock, but this definition is of the modern world and it goes contrary to the laws of old. Now, let us go to the law of old and see what it says about if a person has sex before marriage, what actually happens. So let us go to the book of Exodus chapter 22 and verse 16. It says, "And if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed," she is not promised to anyone, she is not engaged, she is not someone's fiancée, right? "And if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed and lie with her and has sex with her, He shall surely endow her to be his wife. Now, if there was a sin, what would come next would actually be a judgment. But it says, you shall endow her to be his wife. You shall continue, you shall pursue the duties of marriage with this woman. So, sex before what they call marriage was never considered a sin, it never goes against the law. It is the Christian ideology that contradicts the law. The Most High gave us principles on how to go about relationship. We don't understand the elements, earth, air, water, fire, how they affect our bodies. So what happens is the fire becomes predominant when you're in heat. The wisdom has been pushed to the background. So you do what? You act out of that fire, that excitement. So you go and do the sex first. The sex should be the last element to come into operation. However, if you do have sex first, guess what? There's still wisdom on how to go about to pursuing the other components of the marriage. A lot of what you see happen with this is that when you start your relationship with sex, you did not get to know the person, so then you start to see some little things that you don't like. But guess what? The Most High said you have to pursue the marriage. You chose this way, now here's the wisdom. Continue on with it. You have to endow her to be your wife. You have to be a husband to her. The norm and the tradition of the modern culture, it contradicts the original meaning of the word that was translated as fornication. So in this case, the meaning of fornication, sex out of wedlock or sex before marriage, it's not relevant. Here's an example. Let us go to the book of Acts, chapter 15, and verse 20. It says, but that we write unto them that they abstain from pollutions of idols and fornication, and from things strangled, and from blood. Now, listen again. That they abstain from pollutions of idols, and from fornication, and from things strangled, and from blood. Where in that context would you find sex before marriage? So that takes away everything because it has nothing to do with that. Let us jump down to verse 29. It says, that ye abstain from meats offered to idols, and from blood, and from things strangled, and from fornication, from which if ye keep yourselves, ye shall do well. Fear ye well. Where in those contexts do you find sex before marriage? It has nothing to do with that. So that was a poor translation because they did it according to their culture at that time. Fornication has nothing to do with the Greek word porneia. Now let us jump over to Acts chapter 21 and verse 5. It says, as touching the Gentiles which believe, we have written and concluded that they observe no such thing, save only that they keep themselves from things offered to idols, and from blood, and from strangled, and from fornication. Again, this context has nothing to do with sex before marriage. It's all going back to idolatrous practices, rituals, right? So what they were doing was they were pushing the Christian ideological way of thinking that the expressions of sex outside of the formal Roman marriages, the ones you see today, was sinful. That was the ideology that they were pushing. And until this day, a lot of our people cannot see anything about marriage outside the concept of the formal Roman marriage that they know today. Then what was marriage prior to the Roman culture? Because that was not what we were doing back in ancient Israel. So how comes our concept of marriage today only revolves around the formal Roman marriages? It was an ideology. And this is why a lot of people who are married by a ring and a certificate from the state, guess what? A lot of them are still fornicating. A lot of them are not actually married, but they don't know because they're only concept. They only believe in a concept. They don't believe in what the actual biblical marriage entails. Why is it so easy to end a relationship, end a marriage? Because you don't share anything together. It's easy to walk away. You don't have something valuable that is worth keeping. Because if you had understand that you are with this man and this portion of the inheritance will go to your son, guess what? And if he understands the same thing, it would not be so easy for him to walk away. Because every time he walks away from a woman, from a wife, guess what? He walks away from a portion of land. He walks away from this, he walks away from that. The bank accounts, the insurance, the vehicles, the properties, the businesses. This formal Roman marriage is a joke. It's an idea. It's a concept. Marriage comes in values. It comes with morality. It comes with principles. It comes with a way lot more than what people say they bring to the table. Now, what makes this even hard to discern sometimes is because when you go to the Strong's Concordance, you'll find the same definition there. So people are trying to say get deep. They go into the Strongs, they click on the word porneia, and they read it says sexual immorality or sex out of wedlock or sex before marriage, whatever it says. It was the same people that did this translation, the same people that put the same idea into the Strong Concordance. And this is why I said earlier that it was not the Greek language or the Greek culture that corrupted the Bible. It was the Western ideology, the Western society. And you see the same thing even in the Old Testament. Up here it says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. God is singular. When you come down here, you see, okay, let us, plural. The subject up here is God, singular. Down here, it says us, plural. To do what? Push an ideology. What is the ideology that they're pushing? The God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. 3 in 1. It was all an ideology. So it's not the New Testament or the Greek language that goes against the Old Testament. Another example, the word yawam or yom. In English, we say day. What is the Western concept of day? A 24-hour period. Okay, can you find any scripture in the Bible that uses the word yawam or day and makes reference to a period of 24 hours? You'll never find that. That concept is not there. How do we impose that on the Bible? Oh, the same ideology. So even if you're Old Testament only, guess what? You still follow the same ideology. We don't understand that this whole modern Western world that we call Babylon, confusion, that's what it is about. It's embedded in the English cultural way of thinking. The English language is also a tool for our demoralization. It says one thing here, but it means the total opposite of what is being done. Now, let us look at purposes of zanah, or porneia. Harlotry as a means to survive or as a means to appease the gods is different from harlotry for pleasure. And I say this a lot of times. I do not see any honor in a woman doing all these sex for pleasure, whether it be a religious woman or a woman of the streets, right? There's no honor in that, but I can respect a woman who does it not for the pleasure, but because she's in a certain situation and she does it to keep her lights on. She does it to feed her children because no one is there to help her support, and she's not able to get a job for whatever reason it is. I can respect that. But the sex for pleasure, that is a whole different concept. And this is when it goes into the shame of the misuse of the body. So even though the word harlot is the same, it's the same right across the board. Guess what? The intent is removed. So zanah or whoredom was a way of describing the body in a way that was very shameful and was not acceptable. When you give over your body to the lust of your enticement, it gives cause or reasons to question your integrity. So how are you? Let's get some example. Matter of fact, first let's use a biblical one. Let us go to the book of Hosea, chapter 1, and we will start at verse 2. It says, "The beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea. And the Lord said to Hosea, Go, take unto thee a wife of whoredoms and children of whoredoms, for the land hath committed great whoredom, departing from the Lord." Okay, now let's look at this word in the same context. How you as a man of the Most High laying with a whore. It gives cause to question your integrity, because you, being a Hebrew, being a man of the Most High, should be living your life in a particular way, joining your body to the Most High, spiritually, physically with a righteous woman. How are you with this woman? Now I need to question your integrity, right? Now, let's go more recent. How you as a pastor having sex with every new member coming into the church, it gives cause to question your integrity as a pastor. How you as a daughter of Zion have sex with every time you go to Bible study with different group of teachers or different teachers or pastors or priests, it gives cause to question your integrity. So you see, the body is used in a different way that is shameful to the integrity of what you say you are. Oh, you're a man of God, you're a healer of God. Okay, is sex a part of the treatment? Why do you have sex with all of your patients who come for healing? No, it gives cause to question your integrity. So now what is showing you is that the way you're living your life is not in alignment with who you say you are. Your integrity is being questioned. Okay, how comes you, daughter of Zion, this is your husband, but you have a child by this man over here? That gives cause to question your integrity. Okay, you man of God, you Hebrew, how is it that you follow the law, statutes, and commandments, but you put away your wife to be with this woman? Or when it goes dark, you go over to this woman's house before your wife comes home from work? That gives cause to question your integrity. So these are a few examples of when pleasure overrides our consciousness of who we say we are. We give over ourselves to our desires, our attachment to our desires. The next thing, does the Greek New Testament state that sex before marriage was sinful? Does it? No concept of the New Testament ever stated that sex before marriage was a sinful act. And if it never stated that, that means that definition was more based on an ideology than scriptural. The Christian ideology stated that sex before marriage was a sin. The New Testament or the Old Testament never stated that. So that definition was based on the culture of those people who gave that translation at the time. It was based on their vows of celibacy. It has nothing to do with the scriptures and the context of the scriptures. Let us go to the book of Matthew, chapter 5, and verse 32. It says, "But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced, committeth adultery." Let's read it again. "But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, except for the cause of fornication." So hold on. Let's get this straight. So the black woman married to the brown woman, and it says except for fornication, and fornication is sex before marriage according to the Christian ideology. So if this brown woman goes with this red man, that would be fornication. So how would a married woman fornicate? She's already married. Or are they implying that if she goes and married this red man and have sex with him, it's okay because it was not sex outside of marriage? You see, fornication in that context has nothing to do with sex before marriage. And there are a few other precepts that we can go to, few other passages that we can go to that talks about the same concept using the word fornication, but it has nothing to do with sex before marriage. Even the Christian ideology of fornication takes away the moral essence of the word that was translated as fornication. Let us go to the book of John, chapter 4, and just look at an example of what I just explained. This was a conversation with the Messiah and the woman. John chapter 4 and verse 7, it says, "There cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus saith unto her, Give me to drink. For his disciples were gone away unto the city to buy meat. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Jesus answered and said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldst have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. The woman said unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? Art thou greater than our father Jacob? And this is also letting you know that the woman was from the same nation, because she says, Our father Jacob, meaning Jacob was her father as well. Jesus answered and said unto her, Whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again, that physical water in the well. But whosoever drinketh of the water I shall give him shall never thirst, But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. The woman saith unto him, Sir, give me this water that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. Jesus saith unto her, Go, call thy husband, and come hither. So you see, as I was talking about earlier with your integrity, this nature of conversation now can give way to what? To disrespect, to all manners of disrespect. Because he could use this as an opportunity to do what? Prey upon the woman. But what he said instead, go and call your husband. So guess what? You know what happens when your husband is there in the conversation, or what happens when your wife is there in the conversation? You keep yourself in line. Not even the slightest thought of anything would come to mind. And even if it comes to mind, guess what? It would not be expressed. So you see one of the importance of having a husband who's actually your husband and having a wife who's actually your wife. It keeps you in line with your morality. Loneliness can be disastrous. It can overpower your discernment. Now, we're going to look at another aspect of fornication. This is the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 1. It says, It is reported commonly that there is fornication among you, and such fornication as is not so much as named among the Gentiles, that one should have his father's wife. So guess what? You remember back in Leviticus chapter 18, chapter 19, chapter 20, how the Most High, how he gave him laws to say, don't uncover this person's nakedness. Don't lie with your granddaughter. Don't lie with your father's daughter. Don't lie with this person because it's a near kin. There was all of these sexual behaviors were also in a manner to appease the gods, which I'll talk about further down about sexual rites, which a lot of people don't know about. And guess what? Even today, they participate in a lot of these festivals that have been modernized, change names, but guess what? The intent carries the same weight. So even the magazines, they used to have a lot of magazines, erotic readings where you read about sex, and a lot of them are based on incest. It's in the same honor. It's coming from the ancient gods. You won't see the name of the Canaanite gods anymore. You won't see the name of the Egyptian gods anymore. You won't see the name of the Greek gods anymore. But the intent remains the same. It's in the same honor. So this was also a way of doing what? You get initiated into a cult. Sexual right was a big part of religious prostitution. The context of the New Testament and the Greek language, the word porneia, they use the word in the same way it is used when the way you act is not in alignment with your being. And a lot of people have these internal struggles. And one of our biggest problem is our passion for physical companion. And this is one of the topics that you won't find a lot of religious people talk about. They'll talk about all the other sins, dietary law, this and that, who's not keeping the Sabbath, who's keeping it this way, who's not wearing pants, who is wearing this, but sex and the desires and the loneliness and the passions and the things done in secret, you won't find this. You won't find this as a big topic out there. And the more it's kept in the darkness, guess what? The stronger it gets. Let us go to the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 7 and verse 2. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband. So guess what? You cannot be withdrawing sex from your partner. That's not in alignment with who you say you are as a daughter of Zion or as a man of God, as a son of Jacob. So now you're denying that of your person, and then you cause her or him to stumble. That is laying a stumbling block in the person's way. You just laid a stumbling block in the person's way. And now they don't know how to deal with rejection. So guess what? Their only way is to seek attention, to make sure to confirm their belief that there's nothing wrong with them. So now you cause them to go and commit adultery. Now the next aspect is selling your soul. Does the word fornication relate to that context? Now, when you talk about a fornicator, can it also relate to a person who sells his soul? Let us go to the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, and verse 16. It says, "Lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright." Fornicator or profane person. Why would it mention about the selling of the birthright? Let's modernize this. You know what it boils down to? Take the prime minister for example. How is it that you are Jamaican, your tribe or your people do not have access to land, even when there are a lot of wasteland out there, the unoccupied lands, they still cannot go in and take? How comes all these foreigners come in and they get the fatness of our land? They get the best places in the cities, the best places to build business. They get grants, they get loans that your own people cannot get. Why all the resources are owned by foreign investors? That's fornication. You drink of the cup of the wrath of her fornication. You sold your soul. We say the same thing to a lot of people who get into Hollywood, a lot of these musicians, these actors, sports and entertainment. You've compromised. That's probably a better term to use, compromise. And even down to the working field, a lot of people, a lot of those little things you sign to, they go against your principle. A lot of things that you're putting up with are you're entertaining, that you are not speaking against, is because you sign your name to a piece of document that goes contrary to what you believe in. It goes contrary to what you say you are. Okay, you're working on a ship, you know that they're gonna host a gay party tonight, but you have to work. You still go to work. You say, oh, it has nothing to do with me. Compromise. Fornicator. No, we're gonna go into the more ancient aspect of this, the history of the sun god, the moon goddess, and the son of God rebirth. It's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. The only thing they do is change the names of the sun, the moon, and the star. They were given to them. The hosts of heavens were given to these people. Adam understood otherwise. He understood when he saw those constellations, someone was communicating with him. So he could read and interpret the messages. he didn't glorify these elements or the host of heaven, because he understood there was a creator who created them. The other nations don't understand this. Even in the Rastafarian culture, they still worship the sun. The sun is the active energy, the moon is the passive. So you have the electric and the magnetic field. So it's electromagnetic coming together. And these control the forces of nature, the forces of what manifests. So let's get into the ancient god El, Ashtorath, and the sun god rebirth, Baal. So we're going to start at 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 7. It says, "Neither ye be idolaters, as were some of them, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play." Now, the eat and drink, fornication is also used in a sense of what? Drunkenness. This is why the Bible keeps doing what? Talking about excessive drinking. Don't do it. Don't participate in these things. This is why in the parties today, alcohol, there's vast amount of alcohol for you to try, because it goes into something else. This is why it says drink in moderation. You are grieving the loss of someone. Yes, it's okay. You drink to have a merry heart because you don't want to be heavy all the day. You drink. That's different. That's for occasion, because you're not going to be grieving every day. But when you're doing that celebration, some people are there celebrating to nothing. What are they celebrating? Every day. Every weekend you go to party, you go to drink, you go to dance, you do. What are you actually celebrating? And when it says here, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play, it means the dance. They dance before the gods. Neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed, and fell in one day 23,000. Now let us go to the book of Numbers, chapter 25, and we start at verse 1. It says, "And Israel abode in Shittim, and the people began to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab." This is Numbers chapter 31 and verse 16. "Behold, these caused the children of Israel, through the counsel of Balaam, to commit trespass against the Lord in matter of Peor, and there was a plague among the congregation of the Lord." Numbers 25 and verse 2. "And they called the people unto the sacrifices of their gods, and the people did eat and bow down to their gods. And Israel joined himself unto Baal Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel." So you see, this joining to their gods was what? It's a forsaking of your God. It's the same way if you're with this person, he said, two shall come together and cleave as one. So if you leave from this person and go on to that, guess what? Once you join yourself unto this person, you forsake this person here. So you do what? You give way for jealousy. So fornication can also be relating to jealousy. It can be relating to even sorcery, because when you get into the ritual practices, what you'll understand is when you burn your organs, the pertinence of the animals, guess what? It was used as a form of understanding the future. So you would watch the entrails of the animals and you could understand. So when you see they go to the priest and they burn this offering, that offering, and so forth, guess what? How do you think they say, okay, should we go to war with this nation? Will we prevail if we go? They get that wisdom from the burning of these things. So ritual has always been a normal practice. However, we had our laws to tell us what to do and what not to do. Because even when you look at Moses and the magicians of Pharaoh, Moses was working his magic, Pharaoh was working his magic. What was the difference? We were not supposed to use their way of doing things. That's why he gave us laws, statutes, commandments, judgments, and he told us how to go about doing rituals. When we left Egypt, we entered into the land of Canaan that was flowing with milk and honey, meaning the land was prosperous. And the Most High told us, do not do after the ordinances of these people. Let us get that in the book of Leviticus, chapter 18. And verse 3, it says, let's start at verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, I am the Lord your God. After the doings of the land of Egypt, wherein ye dwelt, shall ye not do, and after the doings of the land of Canaan, whither I bring you, shall ye not do, neither shall ye walk in their ordinances. Don't walk in their customs and the customs of their gods. Now, the Canaanites, what they were doing was they were attributing the prosperity of the land, the prosperity and fertility of the land to Baal. The Most High said to the Israelites, don't do it, don't follow these customs. Now you have the ancient god El, or AhLa, and the goddess of fertility, Ashtorath. Now the belief was that the ancient god El and the goddess of fertility, Ashtorath, they came together and they gave birth to Baal. Now these people, they would offer sacrifices to appease the gods. Sheep, bulls, even pigs, they are different from us in rituals. And also, they would sacrifice their own children, which the Most High told us not to do. This is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 12, and verse 31. Thou shalt not do so unto the Lord thy God, for every abomination to the Lord which he hateth have they done unto their gods, for even their sons and their daughters they have burnt in the fire to their gods. This is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 18, and verses 9 and 10. When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you any of that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witchcraft, like I was saying. They would use these organs to do what? To learn of the future, of future events. The Most High didn't want us to do these practices. When he wants you to make a certain move or do some things, he'll come to you in a dream or a vision, or by whichever means he speak to you, but whether by the mouth of prophets or signs. He didn't want us to use these methods of divination. Now, the worshipping of Ashtorath was through the ritual of sex. She was both the mother and the mistress of Baal. Now, we're going to look at some of the sun gods, moon goddesses, and the Son of God rebirth. All of this came from ancient Nimrod. It's the same philosophy that has spread out into every culture. The only thing is they're called by different names, but it's going back to the sun, it's going back to the moon, and it's going back to the constellations. So in ancient Babylon, you had Nimrod, the sun god, the moon goddess was Semiramis, and the sun god rebirth was Tammuz. And you'd understand that Semiramis was also the mother and the wife. You understand the story after Nimrod got her pregnant. Nimrod died in the same period, and then she took over. She became very powerful. She had dominion over many. So she was pushing the same ideology. into all cultures because they had many kingdoms. When Nimrod died, she was pregnant with a son, and that son was Tammuz, and she was pushing that this was Nimrod, this baby was going to be Nimrod in the reincarnation, in the resurrection. And they all worship Tammuz. They all worship the sun god rebirth. And it gets interesting when it comes down to today's culture, right? In Egypt, the sun god was Ra, the moon goddess Isis, and the son of God rebirth would be Horus. Now coming into Greece, you had the sun god Zeus, you have the moon goddess Artemis, and you have the son of God rebirth Adonai or Adonis, whichever way it's pronounced. Now in Rome, you had the sun god Jupiter, you have the moon goddess Diana, and you have the sun god rebirth Apollo. In the Nordic Viking, you had the sun god Odin, you had the moon goddess Joro or Yoro, and you have the son of God rebirth Thor. In the Hinduism, you have Vishnu, the sun god, you have Kandra, the moon goddess, and you have Krishna, the son of God rebirth. In Roman Catholicism, you have God as the sun god, you have Virgin Mary as the moon goddess, and you have Jesus Christ as the son of God rebirth. In Luciferian, you have Lucifer, the sun god, you have the goddess Diana, the moon god, and you have the son of God rebirth, which is the Antichrist. So it's the same philosophy, it's the same concept that came all the way down to today. Polytheism. They believe by performing those magics, they could influence the gods' actions by performing those behaviors that they wish the gods to demonstrate. Meaning they believe in the sexual union with Baal and Ashtorath would produce what? Fertility. They believe performing immoral sex would cause the gods to come together, Baal and Ashtoreth to come together and give a good harvest. Now, this is why earlier I mentioned about the incest in Leviticus chapter 18, chapter 19, and 20. All of those were rituals that they used to do in ancient culture. And you don't have to wonder why certain feasts are kept certain time of the year. For example, the ancient feast of what you all know, Bacchanalia. And it's no surprise the ancient feast of Bacchanalia was kept around March and September. Notice, even in our culture, those were 2 times of the year for harvesting. Because you have in the spring, in the first month, right, you have one season, 6 months, right? So you'll have your first harvest in those time, and then when you get to the 7th month, that would be the end of the year, meaning end of one revolution, because like I said, it is the sun god. It doesn't matter what you call it, whether you call it El, whether you call it Jupiter, whether you call it Zeus, it's talking about the sun. So one revolution would do 6 months and you harvest here, and then in the 7th month you'd start your harvesting here. That's another revolution of the sun. Now, this practice was the basis for religious prostitution. Let us go to the book of 1 Kings, chapter 14, and we start at 23. It says, "For they also built them high places, and images, and groves, and every high hill, and under every green tree. And there were also Sodomites in the land, and they did according to all the abominations of the nations which the Lord cast out before the children of Israel." Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 23 and 17. It says, "There shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel." There were greater abominations done with men being with men more than men being with women. So you can just imagine. Now, the Greek god Zeus, which is in the Roman culture, it would be Jupiter. He took on the role of Baal, which is the god of weather. And this is why you see with the rainy season comes with the harvesting of the crops, because what? When the water comes, when the rainy season comes, guess what? The land is so saturated that the water no longer seeps into the ground. It stays on top, right? The rivers, the banks overflow and it goes out with the water. So the land is now what? Saturated and ready for sowing your seeds, planting your crops. Everything is getting water at the roots. So it gives in the sap and so that all the moist that it needs. So with it getting the sunshine and getting the water, and the water is affiliated with the moon. So this goes back to the sun and the moon. And this is why they glorify those gods when it comes on to harvesting. So Baal being the god of weather and Artemis being the god of fertility and childbirth. Aphrodite is the goddess of love. They continued these practices but under different names. Let us go to the book of Acts chapter 19 and verse 35. It says, "And when the town clerk had appeased the people, he said, Ye men of Ephesus, what man is there that knoweth not how that the city of the Ephesians is a worshipper of the great goddess Diana, and of the images which fell down from Jupiter?" So the practices continued, it's just under different names. So back in this time, in the time of the Greco-Roman, you had what they called temple prostitute, and that was like a job to be reverenced or honored, as opposed to a person who is a prostitute for pleasure. And like I said, with the people who converted to Christianity, they were practicing this chastity and this celibacy type of thing. So when they were laying with the temple prostitute, it would not be in alignment with them calling themselves Christians or followers of Christ. So this is where they derive their concept of fornication being connected to porneia. That was a cultural concept at that time. So the Greek god of wine and orgies, Dionysus, the worshippers, they practiced the same rites, the sexual rites of Baal in the Old Testament. The only thing was changed was the name, but the practice kept on throughout different cultures. Let us go to the book of Second Maccabees. Let's go to the book of Second Maccabees, chapter 6, and we'll start at verse 7. We start at verse 6. It says, "Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient fasts, or to profess himself at all to be a Jew." So this is the time where you have the Greco-Roman ushering in. This is from the Greece, and then comes the Roman. But the Greeks were absorbed into the Roman kingdom. So we say Greco-Roman, right? So it says, "And in the day of the king's birth, every month they were brought by bitter constraint to eat of the sacrifices. And when the fast of Bacchus was kept, the Jews were compelled to go in procession to Bacchus carrying ivy." So all of these practices were a form of what? You're getting initiated into a cult. So they had to go in with what? Ivy or grape leaves. They were brought by bitter constraint to eat the sacrifice, because guess what? These people at the time, they were seeking a form of freedom. Freedom from what? Morality. They don't want to be bounded by these principles and these morals and these standards. So these festivals were a time of doing what? Oh, I'm free. I can drink as much as I want to drink. I can have sex with whoever the hell I want to have sex with. And this is why you see Bacchanalia today is referred to carnival, and it's kept in the same time of the year in spring. So you see how the customs of the ancient carried on until today, and the only thing they did was change the names, but the practices were the same. So you go to carnival, you drink, you party, you get crazy, you end up in someone's bed. The next day you might end up pregnant. You find out that you miss your cycle, you're pregnant. So guess what you do? You go to the store, to the pharmacy, and you get a pill and you get rid of it. Yes, that's the modern way of putting your child through the fire. Because back then with the ancient god Moloch, he would be like this, and he used to be in a certain way, right? Now you place your baby in the hands, but it's an idol, so you cannot hold the baby. The fire of the sacrifice would be between the feet, so the baby would naturally fall in the fire. It's the same. It's just in a pill today. You're not burning a fire. You're not sitting before an idol, but you're still sacrificing the baby. It's all through the subtlety. But I hope this gives a clear understanding of the word that they call fornication, but not just that, but how the ideology of Christianity corrupt the entire outlook on the Bible. This is a propaganda. Christianity is a propaganda. And because of this propaganda, guess what? People don't even care to know what the Bible is really saying anymore. Shalom.